Okay, the second video has the picture already drawn for us. The slant height, that means the outside of the cone, so this is already labeled. It is 6. We have no measurements, so we don't have to say any measurements at the end. Write the volume of the cone as a function of one variable, r, so we need to make sure we have r's. Then they ask, what are the dimensions that maximize the volume of the cone? So here's our picture. This would be radius, this would be height. So if we want to figure that out, well, if we look at h, r, and 6, the way to relate those, well, our primary, we know, is volume. And the volume of a cone they gave us. So they gave us V equals 1/3 pi r squared h. Our secondary has to relate the h, the r, and the 6. So if you look at that, that is all a right triangle. Every time you see right triangle, think Pythagorean theorem. So that's a squared plus b squared equals c squared. The order of these things doesn't matter. A and B just have to be the two legs, and C needs to be the side. So in this case, A and B are my legs here. So that's R and H. So I have R squared plus H squared equals, and then the long side is 6. 6 squared. So that means I have R squared plus H squared equals 6 squared. Okay, so what they asked us to do is get rid of h, which means we need to solve for something that we can plug in for h, so we need to get h equals. So we can subtract r squared and get, well, 6 squared, we know that. We can just write 36 instead of 6 squared. Minus r squared, and then we'd have to square root both sides. So we have h equals the square root of 36 minus r squared. Now, usually when we square root, we do have a plus and minus, but we're going to go ahead and throw out the minus here because we're all in measurements, so we can't have a negative height. So we want the positive one, which is why we know which one that is. This is what's going to be plugged into here. So our new volume formula, when we substitute it in, is 1/3 pi r squared, and then instead of h, we write the square root of 36 minus r squared. So this is what we maximize. They asked us to maximize. So we can find our critical points and maximize this using our calculator. Remember, we are practicing our calculator skills, if I can spell it, on this. So we're always going to go to F3, which is calc for calculus. And then in this case, we're choosing in between 6 and 7. It depends on the problem. In this, we want to go to number 7. You can scroll down or type the number because that says F max. So the maximum of our function is what we're looking for. So when you do that, in your calculator, what you're going to see in the typing screen is F max. And then we want to type in this whole equation. So we have 1 divided by 3 pi r, and then one thing that you'll notice when you're typing into your calculator is that r is kind of hard to find. So when we're typing, just use x. Now when we write it out on our paper, usually you're not going to write out the calculator notation on paper. I'm writing it here so that you know how to do it. But when you write it on our paper, we're going to use r's, but in the calculator, we're going to use x's. So we're actually going to do x squared, and how we do squared is the caret and then a 2. And then that is times, so in parentheses, we need to have our second part. So the square root and then another parentheses opens up, and we have 36 minus, instead of r, we're using x's because it's easier to type, squared, and to square something on our calculator, we're going to use the caret and then a 2. We'll close that parentheses, which closes the square root. We'll do another parentheses, which closes the multiplication. Before we close our last parentheses, we are going to say we need to take the derivative with respect to x, so comma x, then we can close our parentheses. We also want to make sure that we only get positive answers since these are measurements, so we use our vertical bar, which is right by 7, and then x greater than 0. Okay, so from here, you're going to hit enter and you get an answer. Remember, on your calculator screen, it's going to say x, but when we write our answer for our value, we're not going to use x. We are using r. Okay, so r is, they said, 2 square root of 6. Now, for some reason, when you hit green diamond and enter, it's going to say the word false. I don't know why that is, but if you wanted to get a decimal answer, just clear off your screen and then do 2 times the square root of 6 and do green diamond. Enter. And then you will get your decimal, which in this case is about 4.898. Okay. So that's our radius, and what in both of the dimensions? So we do need to go back up and get the height. And our equation for the height was the square root of 36 minus r squared. So what we're going to do is we're going to plug in r. So we have 36 minus 4.898 squared. And the decimal that comes out to is 3.464. So when we answer this question, they didn't give us any units, so all we need to do is write out our answer. So in this case, they did ask us for dimensions. So we're going to say, whoops, that was supposed to be an eraser. There we go. The dimensions of a radius of 4.898 and a height of 3.464. Maximize the volume of the cone. So we don't have any measurements, like any units to put on these. We're saying our radius is 4.898 and the height is 3.464. And that's it for this problem.